Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I head out for a walk and deliver an episode to you while I stroll around. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good morning, listeners. I hope that you're having a pleasant day. This is my second recording on a slightly longer walk here on September 1st. I just finished my top of the stack, and I thought now I would do a shooting from the hip of 3 games I played recently, including 2 that were on the top of the stack. Hopefully you don't feel cheated by my intentionally making 2 episodes out of 1. Today we will be talking about 3 games I've played recently or played this month. The first of these is Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, the Baker Street Irregulars expansion, which is a standalone game. But I think it's interesting to talk about a little bit. I looked through my record of my podcast and I couldn't find anything saying I had talked about it yet. So hopefully I didn't. Then I'm going to talk about Acquire and Jaws. So this will be a good one, I think. I also may have messed up in some part of my previous thing, because I was looking and I had a Shootin' from the Hip episode from August in which I talked about the King's Armory. But I don't have that marked as a game I played this month. But I think it is a game I played this month. So I'm going to have to look at that again and see what's what with regard to that King's Armory. So that might have been a game I played last month that I did not. You can go over to Board Game Geek, or if you go to rattleboxgames.com and go to the entry for the top of the stack episode, you will find a link to my August top of the stack entry, which will reflect whatever it is I decided about the King's Armory. For those of you new to the podcast, the Shootin' from the Hip episode is a collection of 3 short reviews that I record as I'm walking about games that I've played only a couple times. Now, frankly, Sherlock Holmes, the Baker Street Irregulars, I have played that almost enough to do a regular review of it. However, there's 2 reasons I'm not going to. One, regular reviews of heavily content games, like Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, are hard to do consistently because there's a point at which the only way to review it is to talk about the content, and you don't want to talk about the content because you don't want to undermine the narrative experience. But having played 4 of the mysteries so far, I feel like I have a good survey of the game and can happily share with you my thoughts on it. The other 2 games I'm going to talk about today are true Shootin' from the Hip games. I've only played them once each, and that's Jaws and Acquire. So let's just jump right in. Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, the Baker Street Irregulars, is the 4th box in the series of acclaimed mystery games that was originally published in the early 1980s, 1983. In fact, the copy that I have of the first box is the old one, which is not ideal because there's a bunch of typos and stuff that have been fixed in the newer one. It also doesn't match design-wise the older game, or the new ones, which all have a very similar design and they just have a different color. So I'm sure that I've talked about the other 3. Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective is my favorite mystery game. I really like the fact that it's all on paper, that you don't do anything using an app. I think the mysteries are very clever and often very hard, which it feels really satisfying to get the mystery correct then. Okay, so about the mysteries. These ones are written by a new person. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I apologize. I've exchanged actually a couple messages with him on Board Game Geek because I was very excited to learn about this. And he did the Sherlock Holmes mystery in the most recent Unlock, or last year's Unlock section that had a Sherlock Holmes mystery in it. He was the one who created that one. So he's got some practice doing this. So there's a couple things that are different about the Baker Street Irregulars box set that I would say. First, if you've never played one of the Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective game series before, I would have always recommended the Thames Murders and Other Cases, the brown box that is the first set that was released. It's hard because the Baker Street Irregulars is clearly designed to be new player friendly. And so part of me wants to recommend that. However, I might still recommend the Thames Murders because the Baker Street Irregulars adds a couple things that I suspect will make the other ones a little less fun. One of the big problems with the Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective is, as it exists in the other 3 boxes, is that you can accidentally find out things you shouldn't. Like if there's a person who knows a crucial piece of information and the designers assume that you'll go there once you've found a different crucial piece of information, and somehow you find your way to that person before you've found out the step ahead of them, they'll still tell you what you would have learned without the extra step. All right, I'm going to make this concrete. Okay, say that you're trying to find a missing peanut butter sandwich, and you talk to one person and they say, well, I saw Finn in the kitchen. And so then you go talk to Finn and he's like, no, I don't eat peanut butter. But I saw Jack in the kitchen. And you go to Jack and he says, oh yeah, I did it. Well, if you were to skip Finn, I say Finn saw you in the kitchen. And then Jack says, oh yeah, you got me, I did it. Well, if you hadn't gone to Finn yet, it doesn't make sense that Jack would confess. And in the old Sherlock Holmes, they just assume you wouldn't go see Jack until you'd already seen Finn. And so you'd go see Jack and he'd confess even though you didn't have the information he needed. By contrast, the way that the new one works is that you have 26 variables, these letters. And when you go to a place where you get a crucial piece of information, it has you circle a letter on this worksheet. And then later, when you're at other places, it'll give you some information. It'll say, if you have this letter circled, go ahead and read this other bit. If not, you're done. Now, that could be really frustrating because the game tracks how many places you've gone, but they give you a little bit of a salve in that they say, if you find a place where there's a letter, and then later you find the letter, you can go back to that other place without adding another location to your visits. So, for instance, if you were to go to Jack, it would say, if you have the letter P circled, continue reading, otherwise, stop. And then later, when you talk to Finn, it says circle the letter P. Well, now you can go back and read the rest of what Jack had to say without adding another location. And honestly, that works really well. It helps keep the narrative together without penalizing you for going to too many places. It's great, for the most part. That said, we did have one adventure where we were missing an essential piece of the puzzle, and so we kept going to places where it said, if you have letter T circled, continue reading. We're like, nope, we don't have letter T. Then we go somewhere else. If you have letter T circled, keep reading. We're like, what? Oh no. And so basically we just, we were spinning our wheels because we could not find this one piece of information that opened up the whole second story. So that is the downside to the new system. The other system that's introduced in the third case has to do with taking trains and money, and frankly, that was not a success for us. We did not like that mechanism, and it didn't work out well when we played with it. All in all, I'd say these mysteries are generally on par with the other Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective stories, though they might be a little bit easier. We did very well on the first one, scoring 140 points, which is the highest score I've ever gotten on a Sherlock Holmes game. And we have regularly solved the entire mystery, although we are often taking penalties that get us back into the range of normal scores. We've only had one really bad game of the 4 so far where we just couldn't get a handle on it. And frankly, I just was so frustrated, I voted that we stop, even though my colleagues were interested in going. And I decided in future that I would not vote to stop anymore because it actually, on the 4th mystery, we got stuck and we decided to plow through anyway. And we ended up figuring it out, even though we took a lot of penalties. It was a much better experience to plow through, though it also took us like 3 hours, which is too long. All in all, I'd say the Baker Street Irregulars is a good addition to the Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective series, on par with at least the blue box or the red box. I still have fondest memories of the brown one, Although my guess is that is the first box that you go all the way through will be your favorite, because it's relatively new as an experience. The other ones repeat the experience and it's enjoyable, but just not quite the same. Anyway, if you're a fan of the series, definitely recommend. If you're not sure, then maybe see if you can play one that someone else has before you buy a whole box of them. But I really like them. That's Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, the new green box. That's the Baker Street Irregulars. All right, so we have 2 more games to talk about today. The next one I want to talk about is not the most timely review. This is a game that has been around since roughly 14 years before I was born. This is the Sid Sackson game of high finance and high adventure, Acquire. Now, often when you talk to board game geeks about Monopoly and say, well, what's a game that you would play instead of Monopoly? They'll say something like Acquire. And I would agree. I think Acquire is a game about making money and about finance, about buying and selling things, that purportedly is all of the things Monopoly is about. It's frankly just as mean, if not meaner, than Monopoly, because in Monopoly, you can kind of just say, like, sorry, I didn't know you were going to land there. Whereas in Acquire, yeah, I took your company and intentionally tanked the stock. It's a really vicious game. That said, super fun. Basically, the way Acquire works is that you're drawing these tiles that allow you to build hotels on this grid of spaces. Whenever you build a hotel, if it is adjacent to another hotel, you can start a chain of hotels. Or if that other hotel is already in a chain, when you build a new one, it automatically joins the chain. And then it's a stock market game. The more stock you own in the big chains, the more money you have. Whenever a big chain touches up against a smaller chain, it absorbs it, it acquires it, and the person who owns stock in the smaller chain gets a payout and then can sell their stock at market rate and even get even more payout. So it seems like one of the main ways to get cash is to start small chains and then get them acquired by the bigger ones. This is definitely not my wife's kind of game. She was a real sport and played the game anyway, even though she knew she wasn't going to like it. And it turns out, yep, she didn't like it. It also isn't a game that fits her aptitudes for gaming, so not only did she not enjoy it very much, she didn't do very well either. But it was nice of her to play. Anyway, my daughter and I, however, went after each other like old Wall Street pros with financial white collar knives drawn, and a vicious battle to the end. In the end, honestly, a single choice my daughter made and a single choice I made, which ended the game, resulted in me winning $60,000 to $59,800. So I won by $200, which coincidentally is the lowest price of any stock anywhere on the game. So the smallest amount of money that you could spend, $200, is the amount that I won by. So it was a very, very close game and super fun. My daughter really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. We decided to keep it. I have the 1963 3M bookshelf edition of Acquire. It's got this ugly green cover of a person, an old white guy, staring at the reader, looking out the cover. But it's got this really nice sort of plastic grid with these cool plastic tiles. I got it for $3 at Goodwill, so it's a great price. The only downside is that one of the tiles is missing, but the game comes with 2 extra blank black tiles. So I put a label on one of them that had the right number and letter on it, and we have a functioning working copy. So I'm going to keep Acquire. It was a delight to play, even if really vicious. It's a good game. I would look forward to playing at some point, if I had a chance to play one of the other versions that has like little building models or something. That might be fun. But really, the abstractness of the grid worked very well, and I'm happy to continue playing Acquire as much as I can, which won't be very often because my wife hated it, but definitely a game I enjoyed and would happily keep. So that's Acquire from Sid Sackson, originally published by 3M, Minnesota Mining and Manufacturing. out of Minnesota, oddly. And then more recently, I think by Avalon Hill, and thus I presume Hasbro owns that now. I don't know if you went to buy a new copy of Acquire now, I don't know from whom you'd buy it. So the third game on my list is one that was on my list not only because I wanted to play it, but also because it was the audience choice at the top of the stack with 4 or 5 votes. And this is Jaws from Prospero Hall. Jaws is my favorite movie. And the game is designed to be a simulation of the first Jaws movie. They have a variety of things in it that resonate delightfully as you play. We had a really fun moment where we were playing and I said something like my daughter said, because my daughter is sort of enthralled and afraid of Jaws at the same time. She's been swimming in the ocean a number of times and has been afraid to watch shark movies because she's afraid that she will give herself a fear of the ocean, which frankly I can understand. I watched Jaws a whole bunch when I was her age, and for a long time I had an irrational fear of water, of deep water. Even though, like in Minnesota, in a freshwater lake, if I was out in deep water, there was a little part of me that was worried about Jaws, which is hilarious. So I can understand why she wouldn't want to watch it. But so while we're playing the game, she's sort of asking questions about the movie and stuff, and there's a great moment, or a funny moment, where she asked how big Jaws was. And I went into a quote from the movie. I said, "That's a 20-footer, 25. And then my daughter says, 3 tons of them. And I'm like, what? And then for a second I thought she had watched some sort of clip video of the movie, or she'd done a bunch of reading about it, or even gone and watched it secretly, because that's a deep cut quote. That's not something that most people would just throw out. And after a couple seconds of letting me dangle, she pointed out that the cards, which were upside down to me because I was on the other side of the table, all had flavor text on them, and that was one of them. It was she could see me basically reading the first 2 lines, and then she said 3 tons of them is the third line on the card. Everyone had a good laugh at my silliness in thinking that she somehow knew quotes from the movie without having seen it. But so the movie itself, or the game itself. This is a delightful, lightweight strategy game. Very indicative of the kind of thing Prospero Hall tends to make. Does not reach, for me, the level of horrified. If I were not a fan of the movie Jaws, I would think this is a pretty mediocre game. It rides on its theme very well. That said, it rides on the theme very well. This feels like sort of reenacting the movie. First half of the game is a hidden movement game where the player who's the shark is trying to eat swimmers from the beaches, and the players who are the crew are trying to find the shark and put barrels in him. When the shark has 2 barrels or 9 swimmers have been eaten, then the board flips over, and the second half of the game begins. The second half of the game follows the last third of the movie, in which the people are out on the boat hunting Jaws, and he has attacked their boat and broken the engine, so the boat can't move. Then, over the course of several rounds, Jaws attacks the boat, slowly breaking it apart. Meanwhile, the players attack Jaws while he's attacking. It's a cat and mouse game where the players are trying to be in a spot where they can hit Jaws, and Jaws is trying to be in a spot where it can hit the players. As the game goes along, it gets easier for the players and harder for Jaws, because the Jaws is limited to 3 out of 8 spots where it can surface. And it only wins by eating the players or sinking the boat. And once you've committed to where you're going, the players then, if the players are able to hit you without you getting them, there's nothing you can do about it. Both the first and the second half have a significant element of taking a sort of hidden movement, of trying to figure out where the other player is going to go and what they're going to do. Both Jaws and the players get these special skill cards that depend on how successful you were in the first half of the game. In our game, I got 4 cards as Jaws, and The crew got 9 cards because I had only eaten 3 swimmers out of the 9 by the time they got the second barrel in me. That said, it was a very close game in the second half. I think I was a little faster to figure out the way that Jaws could win. I had a lot of lucky dice rolls early on, but it ended in a nail biter of a end game in which Jaws had 1 segment of boat of the 8 left to destroy, and it was damaged, so it was half destroyed. And 2 of the 3 crew members were down to 1 hit each, and one of them had 2 hits left. And then they managed to kill Jaws. So it was a nail biter. It was very close. I think that had the players, that if we were to play again in that situation, I don't think Jaws would get anywhere near so far. I think I benefited from us as a group not really understanding the mechanisms. So, what did I think of Jaws? Thematically, it's perfect. It was very well crafted. All the little pieces and bits and tokens and cards fit the movie perfectly. The experience of playing it was like reenacting the movie. That said, like I said, it's not a great game. Very limited interactions in terms of what you're doing. Basically, in the first half, as Jaws, you're trying to dodge the crew and eat the swimmers. It's a hidden movement game. And as the crew, you're trying to just be in the spot or next to the spot where Jaws is a couple times. And if you succeed at that, then we move on to the second half. In the second half, again, it's trying to anticipate what the other person's going to do. You have a little bit more flexibility as the shark in the second half. And like it should be, the shark is more scary to the people in the second half. Despite the fact that the mechanism-wise and strategy-wise, it was just okay. We had a lot of fun playing it. It was very tense at the end as we were trying to figure out, will they kill Jaws or will Jaws succeed? And it's one of those things where even though I lost, I had a good time. So that's always a good sign. It'll definitely be staying in my collection, but honestly, it's staying in my collection because I'm a Jaws fan, not because I like the game all that much. It'll be a good game to bring out when we have family in town who are lighter gamers, or when we have people over who are not gamers at all but would like to try a game. Jaws would be a good one to bring out because it's going to be really accessible to non-gamers. It's going to feel really thematic and be engaging in that way. But it's definitely not just not that deep a game, which I'm sad to say is my experience with most of Prospero Hall's output so far. None of their games have really captured my imagination from a gameplay perspective. The closest, like I said, would be Horrified, which I thought was good, but honestly, I just as soon play Pandemic. Or I feel like it's the same as Pandemic in terms of the feelings the game gives me. That's it for my Shootin' from the Hip episode. I would love to hear what you've been playing recently. Have you tried any new games lately? What did you think of them? Have you played any of these games? Acquire, or Jaws, or Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective, The Baker Street Irregulars? Which of these would you be excited to try? Any of these, or anything else inspired by the podcast, or just game conversation that you'd like to do. You can get that all started by going over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and dropping me a line. I'm Wombat929. If you were to post in the guild, I would see it there. You could also email me, brendan@rattleboxgames.com. Rattlebox Games is a game design collective that my partner Rob and I use to both publish games, although we've only done that once, and design games that we sell to other publishers, which we've done a couple times. So you can reach me there, brendan@rattleboxgames, or visit our website, rattleboxgames.com, although I was looking over it the other day and it is woefully out of date, so I have some work to do there. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed this walk today. I appreciate you joining me, and I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. All right, take care. Bye-bye.
to you by
Rattlebox Games.